Okay. Har jeg lyd i denne her? Yes. Okay, thank you, and excuse us for the delay. We are welcoming Lisbeth Bech Poulsen on the stage.
Yeah, okay. So I'll do it in English. Thank you very much for inviting me. We'll have a political debate at 1 o'clock this afternoon, but I was also so lucky as to be invited to talk about some of the themes from my upcoming book. Sorry, a little bit of advertising. And the book centers about themes on surveillance capitalism, the future of work, and other things. But those are the two subjects that I'll talk briefly about today. And I would prefer to have a debate, so I won't use all of my time just talking here. I would like to have a debate. I'm a politician, and I know that in these circles, politicians are almost as popular as Google and Facebook. But I also know that one of the things about BornHack is to bring politicians and technicians and IT people together, because we have this giant divide right now, and it's not good for anybody. It's not good for the policies. It's not good for finding solutions. So I hope that in the near future we'll have like a closer dialogue, because you are very right when you say that these dilemmas and all what's going on in the world right now today is not high on the agenda in Christiansborg, in the parliament. There's always, the day-to-day politics that triumph, healthcare or immigration issues or refugees or whatever, and this is not high enough on the agenda, even though I think all of us can agree that it's one of the most important political issues. And Karen, who is here, she's also one of the very political voices who have tried to put it high on the political agenda. And I think we need more people who are both interested in IT and the political side of it to bring it up to speed. When I started to talk to my colleagues in SF, and I forgot to introduce myself, my name is Lisbeth Bech Poulsen. I'm a member of parliament since 2011. For the Socialist People's Party. And when I tried to talk to my colleagues about it, it was like, they looked at me as I have this tinfoil hat on, and you probably see it as a lot as well, that when we try to bring these things on the agenda, people think we are like a bit paranoid or too much. But luckily, we had Cambridge Analytica, and that was, a good thing that we had this scandal, because then suddenly these things become more mainstream to discuss. Doesn't mean that people understand the full reach of it or the implications, but at least we have this broader discussion, and I think it's the important first step. The topic of today is, can democracy survive for industrial revolution? And it's a little bit dramatic, I know that, but I think the democratic issues are very, very big and serious, and we are not taking it serious enough from the political sphere. So I'll briefly come into some of the issues of my book. And I don't think that I can teach you anything. It's a little bit difficult coming to somewhere like BornHack and try to talk about these issues, because obviously you will know much more than me about all of it. But just to try to get some ideas about what we can do from the political side of things. I also asked the question about how to regulate big tech by policy, and also how do we use activism, what many of you are doing, to overturn surveillance capitalism. I just made a quick search on start page to see what came up as the first picture if I search for surveillance capitalism, and there's this book. Some of you may know it. The book is not important. It's important about where you can buy it. So capitalism has this funny way of always being able to absorb everything. Like when you talk about surveillance capitalism, the first hit is on Amazon or Google or somewhere. So it's very powerful to always absorb the critical stance that people can have towards it. You know this motto? This is Israeli author, some of you may know him, Yuval Noah Harari, who said that if some of these big tech companies and the Silicon Valley people heading them are having their way of creating big technical empires where there's no longer any room for democracy, neither like the formal side of democracy, elections and so on, but not democracy as a way that you understand in a broader sense that we are involved in shaping our society. If that happens, humans will lose their authority, and humanist practices such as democratic elections will become as obsolete as rain dances and flint knives. I think there are very big risks at hand right now. We have everything from warfare to state or government issues being influenced by this. We have governments who want to, on the one hand, criticize big tech, but at the same time wants to use the same tools for like profiling citizens. So one of the discussions for the last 6 months, apart from GDPR, in Parliament has been very much about how much information regarding the citizens are the state allowed to bring together in profiling the citizens. And you know, often the argument is, if we want to help our citizens, we must know everything about them, because then we can spot, you know, the kids at risk or citizens who might need our help and so forth. And I'm sure that some of the politicians, they really mean this. They are in good faith. They want to get all the public, the private information together because they want to help citizens at risk. But it just worries me a lot when you use the same tools, when you use the same principles as big tech, but you do it from the government side of things or from the state side of things. So you have like a Facebook principle inside the Danish government now, where you say all this beautiful data, the massive amounts of data, we must pool it so we can get a better understanding about how our citizens behave, who are at risk, and so forth. And I often ask, like, members of the current government, aren't you supposed to be a liberal government, liberal parties? I think it's more now the center-left parties that are worried about like basic rights, freedoms, like a liberal way of living, that there are limits to what the state can do and know about us as citizens. And so it's funny that in a way things have reversed. If some of these tools were available before the fall of the Berlin Wall, you know, all areas of the political life would have said, you know, this is so scary, we can't use this. There need to be a private space for citizens is fundamental. And that discussion have just disappeared. And we have like broad parts of the political life in Denmark who doesn't really see this as a problem. I don't really know how we have gone from, you know, using the Stasi as the big scare to now saying, oh, if just the reasons are benevolent, if it's just because we want to help people or prevent terrorism or all these things, then it's fine. We see it with logging. What's it called in English? Thank you. We see it with face recognition technology. I have the Minister of Justice in a meeting in a couple of days to discuss the police use of facial recognition software and technology. We have so many parts of political life where you use technologies without even really thinking about it. I don't think a lot of the members of government and politicians have like one big evil plan of just, you know, overturn democracy. They don't have that evil plan. They just haven't thought these things to the end of it. I think they are they and a large part of the population are naive about where we could end up using these technologies blindly and not having like safeguards about how much data, how much information can the government or the state obtain about their citizens. You probably know this, you know, we have the big tech, they are monopolies or monopsonies. Google have 90% of search advertising. Facebook, of course, dominates social media. 80% of mobile social traffic. Amazon controls over 83% of ebook sales, and so on. And Amazon is, as you know, not only in the book business, they sell everything. They sell diapers, they sell hospital equipment, they have full automatic storage rooms, they want to deliver everything to everywhere in the world by drones. So we have these very few, very big companies, and it's not really important what they sell or what they do. It's a massive amount of data about all of us, who we are, what we buy, how we spend our money. That's the problem. And 100 years ago, for example, in the US, you had antitrust law. You really were worried about democracy if a certain company controlled too much of the market. So you had Bell, who invented the phone and then made the company AT&T. You all know it. And then they said, you can't have a piece of infrastructure so important as the telephone, and that was at the time where nobody really spoke in not a lot of people spoke in the telephone. You can't have one company dominating the market, because it's also a democratic problem, so you split it up. You did it with Standard Oil and so on. And that was companies that just had like one single product. Perhaps it was an important product, oil, but still one product. Now you have Google, who dominates 5 out of 6 most important areas of online life and all this data. And we still just say, okay, when you really behave badly, we give you a fine, a huge fine. But still, when we talk about Vestager, and I think she's doing a good job as competition commissioner, that she's giving like record big fines, it has to be seen in comparison to how much money they're making. And the big fine that was put upon them recently was the same as a month and a half profit of Google. So you don't change a profitable business plan, a business model, if the biggest fine you get is a month and a half worth of profit. as you know, this is not just a question about where to go, what to buy, a question about a monopoly. It's a question about who controls the new capital, which is data, who can influence our elections, what we talk about, what we know. And I'll come back to what we could do about it, but what we can't do is just accept status quo. We can't have the most important big companies in the world being unregulated as they are today, even post GDPR. You all know the concept, surveillance capitalism. Edward Snowden said, you know, it's funny how what used to be called surveillance now is called social media, and it's a very nice trick to just reframe it in a nice setting, in a nice way. And you don't have to be like an anti-capitalist, but capitalism has always been defined by, you know, you need to conquer new markets, and that's why it's, in some ways, it's anti-market in itself, because it always wants to try to create a monopoly. It's always in its nature. It's nothing like good or bad about it. It's just in its nature, always trying to conquer new markets, becoming a monopoly. And that's why even the most libertarians, they want the state, the government to come and make some rules, so you won't have market domination by one or few companies. And now we have the combination of a capitalist system combined with surveillance, and combined with that, in some sense, the market and the government are working together. So in the most extreme case, you have China, who, as you know, dominates the even the, on paper, private companies. The biggest companies in China are in some ways controlled by the Chinese government. They use that for example, Alibaba or WeChat, or some of the big platforms where 1 billion Chinese people are active on. They use that to gain information about their own people. And as you probably heard as well, they want to give points for good social behavior. So to be a good Chinese citizen, you have to do this and that, and not do this and that, and they will know, because you have this unholy alliance between social media companies who have all this data and the government who wants to control their own population. And then we have, that's obviously the most extreme case, but in Denmark we also have the discussion about how much information should the government be able to obtain, and at what time, you already do it to some extent, will you cross-reference the data from social media or online data with the public or state-obtained data. And then I think we have like a real problem, because the private big tech in itself is a major democratic problem. But if you don't have the public sphere to say, at least we'll try to regulate it, at least we'll try to set a limit on how much sensitive data we can obtain about the citizens, but you're like working together, you're getting information from the private sphere and using it in the public or political sphere, then it gets really dangerous. We also have a debate right now in Parliament about how much digital services should be automated. Like, for instance, if you want how economic housing aid or a child benefit or so on. So these services, should they it be automated? Okay, to a certain degree, you might be able to automate, just make these decisions digital. But what about if the municipality or the state is saying, okay, this child is at risk, maybe the child should be removed from home, put in foster care. Obviously, right now we would say that decision cannot be automated, cannot be made from a algorithm that decides that. But I see more and more that this, I'm sorry, like singularity you approach to this kind of decisions, that we should put these decisions in the hands of algorithms because they are wise, they are objective, they are not influenced by bias as people are. I think it's a really dangerous road to take, because who's responsible for those decisions if you can just say, oh, the machine told us to do that. And we are moving very fast in Denmark with digitalization, sorry. We are one of the most digital countries in the world, but as you all know, we're like number 34 in security. So we put all these public data out there. We have all these systems that are really very unsafe. And we're being warned again and again that sensitive data in like police records or sensitive data about our lives, our kids' lives, that these are not safe, and we keep moving on because speed alone is some sort of good thing, you know. You all, or at least those of you who are Danish, you remember this father from Ballerup Kommune who was the IT administration or boss there, where he said his kid had tried to was supposed to take this test about well-being. All these kids are saying, you know, how they feeling, blah blah blah. These tests are not safe. These data are not being protected, and now the kids who are more in line with protecting themselves than a lot of adults in this country, they just said, we won't take the test, or we will take it, but we'll just say, I don't know, for every question. Because they know that this is sensitive data about themselves that are not being protected enough by lawmakers or the system that we have put up. So I just think it's a really good example about how many young people are actually more aware than a lot of politicians in parliament about the risk about all these data flowing around. I just took out a few of the topics about surveillance capitalism. Fake news. It's not new, as you know. You always try to interfere in other countries' elections. Now it's just the Western world that's being attacked. So now we're really sensitive about it, because according to the US, this has never happened before. They never interfered in like elections anywhere in the world, tried to make people vote in a different way. This is completely new. Of course, it's not new, but the methods in doing it are new and quite effective. I know that there's this big discussion about if Cambridge Analytica overdid what they, actually did, but at least I think we're all agreeing on that it is a problem. Then the whole idea about smart cities, smart everything. I've been to the World Mobile World Congress in Barcelona a couple of years, and the smart city technologies, they're all over. And who don't want to live in a smart city? It's green, it's effective, it's like heaven on earth. Everything will be really lovely, energy efficient. And what they forget to tell us is that these things only work if you have sensors everywhere, if you have data everywhere. And only a few people, I heard somebody from Singularity U, who was very open about, said, yes, this demands that you give up privacy. But why not? Because you get all these other lovely things. And privacy is like an old-fashioned way of thinking about it. So this is also a battle between worldviews. Do you think that privacy is a fundamental right, or is it something that's like old-fashioned and you should give up because you get a lot of other really nice things? And it's just being framed in a language and words and rhetorics that sounds really lovely. And everybody wants to live in a city where there's no congestion and where there's like clean air and screen and everything's connected. But the other side of the story is being neglected right now. I won't go through the rest of it. You know the whole discussion about cashless society right now. The second topic of my book is the future of work. I'll go through it quicker than the first part of it, because I think the first part of it is more aligned with the discussions you have here about surveillance capitalism. But right now, as you see, especially in the US, you have these very big companies. They make a lot of money, and they have relatively few people employed compared to the old days where you relied more on work-intensive labor. This is an interesting number, I think. It's from the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics. They counted through 15 years how many working hours that people in the US in the private sector made. So in 1998, people worked 194 billion working hours. Then 15 years later, the economy had had grown by more than 40%. The US population were up by 40 million people, and they were still being worked 194 billion working hours. So everything would be fine if it just meant, you know, people worked less, got the same or more out of it, but that's not the case. I don't know if you can see it, but here, productivity and wages. And we all know that wages among the working class and middle class in the US have stagnated, even though productivity have gone up. And for a long time, people are very angry at the Chinese, the Mexicans, you know, all these people who are stealing their jobs. But none other factor have been so effective as the factor of automation in the US. And we will see it everywhere else as well. We'll see it in like the fast food business, in the Amazon storage rooms, Tesla factory. I went to see the Tesla factory. It didn't look like a car factory, but there were very few people on the ground floor. They were there to take care of the robots and make sure that they were working and were in fine condition. In the US alone, there are 3 million people being employed in transportation, like moving stuff from A to B. Even in Denmark, like half of the Pension Denmark have said that half of the interactions in few years with customers or members of Pension Denmark will be solely by chatbots or automated decision making. So it's all corners of society, all areas of our jobs, if we are a doctor or accountant, some within the IT community as well. Maybe politicians at a certain point, I don't know, perhaps not tomorrow, but we see it on all areas of our life, that automation and AI, robotics, and so on, that they are replacing jobs. Obviously, there'll be new jobs, but the question is it the same number of jobs, or is it for the people who have been laid off? And what do we do if we have a very big part of the population that can't get a job, that's not equipped to take the jobs that are being created? You hear a lot of people in Silicon Valley talking about basic income. And it's not about me thinking it's a good or bad idea, but the reason why they're suggesting it is very clear. If you want somebody to buy your products, to buy your apps, to buy your services, you need them to have some kind of income so they can do that. If you believe that a lot of people will not have a wage income, then you need to subsidize it by something else. That could be a basic income. You know, all the people from Silicon Valley who's talking about this. 100 years ago, Henry Ford, with the car plant, he knew this dilemma. He couldn't keep pushing wages down, so his workers should have a living wage so they could buy his cars. It's just a little bit the same thing now. But if you don't do anything else but giving people a basic income, then you're basically telling them, you know, shut up, buy our stuff, and here's a check so you can survive and have enough money to do this. I just think it's important to keep in mind what their motive is for doing it. In my book, I talk a little bit about what we can do as politicians by policy, what you and others can do by activism, because I don't think it's one or another. Sometimes I meet people who say, like, regulation is just, you know, so stupid, and you politicians, you don't know anything, and you have no power to do anything, and you don't get it, and so on. I think it's like we should stop this divide right now, because a lot of us have common interests. We want to change things before it's really too late. And there are areas where, if the political will is there, we can regulate much better. It's not being done by GDPR. Net neutrality is under attack. We have, as I said before, this unholy alliance between the market and the state. We need a constitution regarding our right to our own data, our right to digital privacy. All these things you can do politically as well if there are political will. But we also need BornHack. We need dataethics.eu. We need None of Your Business. We need IT Politisk Forening. We need all of them, all of the activists, all of the organizations to keep being rebellious about what we see right now. And we need to convince the people in power and that's the government right now, that we need stronger regulation to make sure that our democracy is not like withering away. Yeah, like we always end up discussing, like, is it good or is it bad, or should we just go ahead? I think right now we have, apart from the discussion about Facebook and Cambridge Analytica, we have in large part of Danish society and everywhere like a tech optimism. The more the better, the faster the better. Move fast and break things. We just, you know, you're just really old-fashioned if you are criticizing or asking questions. And that's a problem. So I'm not really sure about how to move forward, because if you are being critical and if you ask the critical questions, you are being just viewed as somebody who don't want the future, who's not excited about all these things. So it's not really a question about pro or con technology for me. It's about using it as throughout history for the good, for what we think it should be used for. So it's not like an anti-technology agenda I have here. I'll finish now because I really hope that you have some questions or remarks, or that you want to teach me a lesson or tell me something, or do it afterwards. I'm here all day.
Yes. Does anybody have questions?
So just a remark, that fourth thing with the wages, that's just a myth. The only reason he gave high wages was to retain employees because they were quitting.
I'm sorry?
Ford, when he gave higher wages, it's a myth that it was to be able to buy his cars. He just gave it so his employees would not quit.
Yeah, I read that too, and that he was really no saint. I was not trying to paint like a nice picture of him, because he was really meddling in people's lives. He was like dictating who they could see or spend time with, or if what they were drinking and eating and so on. So it was not like to paint a very nice picture of him. But he was still paying them enough for people to be able to buy stuff. Right. Yeah.
Well, you're talking about awareness among the politicians, but I think in this, how many votes can I get at the next election? Democracy we have is the awareness in the population. You have to rise first. I mean, it's already here in Nice. They have face recognition in the streets due to terrorism. So you have to make people somehow revolt against it if you want to change things.
Yeah, you're saying that it's already here, and I agree with you. As long as a lot of people are afraid of terrorism, of the unknown, and somebody is coming to them and say, we have a solution, we have technology, we have these tools that the police can use, perhaps predictive policing, all this will help you feel safe. And a lot of people prefer that right now to a lot of us who are saying, you know, be careful about where this is going to end. You know, these tools have consequences as well for your right to privacy and so on. So it is difficult to have this discussion, because a lot of people will choose a sense of security and safety over freedom and fundamental rights about privacy. I'm not really sure about how to solve that. I think we've just been lucky compared to other places in the world. In Denmark for a long time, and people forgot what's at stake, because we've been relatively free, open society for so long, that people forget or don't know how it is to live in a society that's clearly unfree.
I think that it's true that we need to make I'm Karen, the other politician. It's true that we need to make the public more aware of the need for privacy and protection of data, but I think it's also really necessary that we make all of the politicians at the different levels aware of it, because a lot of the data use is out in the municipalities. And if the Association of Municipalities in Denmark is promoting more and more use of big data and is relying on companies that are promoting this use without regard for privacy, and they don't have the knowledge and the understanding of going against this, then you will see things like in Gladsaxe, where they will try and do a point system like in China, and you will see these school trivselsmålinger where they don't respect the data of the kids. If you don't have the local politicians to stop it and make sure that it's politically debated, then it will just be passed through as a technicality that is just okay. I mean, there was a day about digitalization and data that was held by the Association of Municipalities. And if you have something about social affairs or health, then the politicians are invited. But when it was data, it was only the civil servants that were invited and not the politicians. And at the same time, they're saying, oh, you must remember that digitalization and data is political. But if they don't inform the politicians on how to make the decisions, and if they don't invite them when they're having the discussions, then how are you supposed to do it?
Hello. Yeah, I just we were talking about as if we still have a chance to stop this democratization of because we still have a free choice, and but do you think there's like an end date where the big tech data companies will have the ability to make the democracy as they like?
To a certain extent, I think we're there right now, but I don't think it's too late, and you cannot really be in politics if you don't have at least like a little bit of optimism about the future. But I think we're really in the 11th hour right now, and it's a good thing that we had the Cambridge Analytica scandal, because at least we got the discussion out to a broader audience about, we can all be manipulated, the extent of data that you leave online, how much it's telling, it shows of you, So to that extent, it was a good thing that it came out. But I think we have a long way to go in educating each other and about what the price is, but also, you can't tell people just leave Facebook, because that strategy will just be like, people are like, well, I know the consequences, but I don't want to, You have to, and also I think we leave a lot of responsibility on the individuals, and they are not equipped to it. They say we would like some protection, but it's too complicated, So some of the responsibility, of course, is on the individual, but much more should be that we say politically, in the way we regulate, that some things are critical infrastructure, some big data belongs to society as a whole because we produce it. You can't privatize that. Like a lot of the healthcare or health data around, we just give it to private companies, with the smartwatches and everything, instead of saying, of course, this belongs to society as a whole because it can help us, with diseases and so on. Why are Tesla and Waymo and all these, why are they driving around or mapping the roads for self-driving cars? It's also to get data about critical infrastructure on our roads. And we need this discussion about to say, what are private companies' rights to own? What are individuals, but also what are society's collective rights? And to that extent, I think we need a discussion about what kind of data belongs to society as a whole. And we don't really have that today. It's been very centered on what are companies' rights and what are the individuals' rights, but there are also collective rights. And if you have a monopoly or you have a company that's very big or sits on very critical data, you have the rights as a society to go in and say this should be open or this should belong to all of us combined.
So we still have a chance.
Yes. Yes. Yeah.
So we're talking a lot about data surveillance and the capitalist version of it, but don't we have a bigger problem in democracy that the government and parliament is becoming increasingly closed for us? In other countries, we have public databases where you can go in and find all documents by any administration, whereas in Denmark, a law was brought in recently that you voted for to close the government even more. And today, not even parliament has their questions answered by government. So isn't that something, a debate that's needed? We have more insight towards the private sector than we do to the government. The government can refuse to give us any insight at all, but now with GDPR, the private sector can't.
I think you're right to a certain extent. I think you are perhaps a little bit too optimistic about all the, yeah, you can get a lot of information regarding what private companies have of data on you, but you are a very informed citizen. What about the people who say, I would like to be on Instagram, and if I put my privacy settings in this and that way, it ends, I can't be there anymore, and I want to be there. So, you know, my point is just you're putting a lot of people in an impossible situation because we're not there yet where we say you should be able to use some of these products without giving away all these rights. But you're also right that you talk about offentlighedsloven, this law that we also tried to change, and which closes down a lot of critical information. You're completely right. I just think the really dangerous thing is if you have the combination of the two worlds, like you have a state or government with very big powers, and you have all the data that people leave in their social or private life, and if you combine those two powers, you don't have any checks and balances at all anymore, because you don't have your private life where you can escape to, and you have a government or state that uses all these data to profile citizens, or, you know, to predictive policing, or what it could be. Yeah.
But we do still have, some would argue, the free choice of whether or not to be on Instagram and Facebook. But when I walk down the street and the Danish parliament takes my photo and I ask them for a copy of it, they say, oh, no, we're above the law. And the Datatilsynet, the only sort of the administration that's meant to be sort of surveilling all of this, say, yeah, but with the public sector, we can't really do anything, and it's Folketinget, so nah. So don't we have a choice with Facebook. We don't have a choice with the public sector. Isn't it a bigger problem that we don't know what the public sector has on us?
Yes, but I still think that I don't disagree with you on that. I don't. I just think you say, yeah, we don't have to be online. We can just leave that world. But what kind of people in the modern world does not leave breadcrumbs around online or in the digital world? I think you're very optimistic about a lot of people just leaving the digital world and say, we have a choice, I don't have to be part of that, so it's not something we need to regulate because people can just not be there. It's close to impossible not to be there. Even if you're not on Facebook, there'll be a shadow profile on you, a Facebook you know what I mean, right? So I don't think we can just say, we have a lot of problems here, but in the digital world or online, you can just leave. The problem is present in both spheres, and if with all the data that we also get online, that becomes even more dangerous if you have a government or a state that wants to combine all these data to have like a profile of you.
I think we'll have the last question. Time is running.
Not so much a question, just I agree with you that we need to, that the government need to be more transparent, because if we have to make this stance against the private sector, we also have to trust in our public sector. And without the transparency, we can't trust it. But I will say that stuff like GDPR is skin deep in terms of the private sector. Yes, they will give you the data, but you do not know the extent of how they use the data. And that's a pretty important part of many of their business practices, is how they use it. So yes, they can say you visited this site on this day because you searched for it or something. But how does this rank you in some internal system in how to provide information for you? How does this? You don't get that information, and the companies keep that from you as well. But they look transparent. But I think for most companies, the transparency is skin deep. It's only, well, we have this data on you, but we won't tell you how we use it.
No,
I just want to say thank you for the opportunity to come and talk about this. I think it's very important that we meet and discuss, and that you don't think that politicians are just idiots that you shouldn't waste any time on, because we still have like also a formal democracy in this country that it's worth spending a little bit of resources and time on to promote what's also important for you, I guess. Yeah. Thank you.
Yes, thanks a lot.